Hello there and welcome to Cansanity. It's another rainy day here in Southern Ontario, and so I thought I would get into my kitchen and do some baking. But before I do that, I thought we need to put on dinner. Now, one of our favorite meals here is bean burritos. And one of my favorite ways to make bean burrito spread is to do it in the slow cooker, because I can put all the ingredients in the slow cooker and then set it and forget it. And so that's what I'm going to do today. So the way I make my bean burrito spread is I put 9 cups of water in a slow cooker. Then I add 3 cups of dried pinto beans. Now you want to rinse the pinto beans and just sort through the beans a bit to make sure there's no stones or any soil in your beans. But I've already done that, so I'm just adding that directly to my pot. Then you're going to take 2 whole onions and peel them and then quarter them. And then you're just going to put them in whole, the whole quarters. Then you're going to add half of a jalapeno that's diced small. Now I grow jalapenos in my garden, so I always dice them up and put them in a nice cube tray, put a thin layer of water over top of that, and then I freeze them. And then I have ice cube jalapenos to just pop into my bean burrito mix. So I'm just going to add that. Then I add a teaspoon and 3/4 of ground pepper. So I'll just add that. And then I add 3 teaspoons of salt. It seems like an awful lot of salt, but this does make a lot of bean burrito spread, and so it is nice with the 3 teaspoons of salt. And then a whole teaspoon of smoky ground cumin. Now I love cumin in my recipe, so you could cut this if you would like it to not have as much spice in it, but I like it with a whole teaspoon of ground cumin. And then I add 2 tablespoons of minced fresh garlic, and that's about 9 whole cloves. So I add that, and then you can just give that a stir, and then you just cover that up. And I already have my slow cooker on high, and I'm going to cook it on high for 8 hours. And once it's done cooking, then I'm going to take out a cup of the liquid and reserve it. Then I'm going to strain out the rest of the liquid, and then I'm going to throw all the solids back into the pot, and I'm going to mash that. And then you use the reserved cooking liquid to add back to the paste so that you can get the desired consistency that you would like. I usually add about 1/4 cup of the liquid back to the paste, and then I just mix that up, and it will firm up a bit once you put it in the fridge overnight. And so if you want to reserve a little bit of that liquid to add the next day, if it's not quite the desired consistency, then you can do that. This bean burrito spread is fabulous once you try it. I'm sure you'll make it a part of your regular cooking routine. The recipe is on cansanity.com, so take a look at that if that's something that you're interested in making. Well, I think I'm all ready to start my baking now. I'm back. So I've already started my baking, and I've made 2 batches of my Biscuit-Like Scones with dried fruit. Now I did 1 batch without any fruit in it, and I did 1 batch with some dried currants. And I'm just about to do 1 more batch with some dried cranberries. Now, if you're going to use dried cranberries or raisins, you want to chop them small so that they're about the size of dried currant. So I've already done that. I've already chopped my cranberries, and so they're all set to go. Now, I like to use my food processor for this recipe because you want to cut the butter into the flour mixture quite fine. So You don't want to have clumps of butter in this particular scone recipe. Some scone recipes, it's okay to have bigger clumps of butter because the butter actually helps to leaven as it's baking. It helps to leaven the scone. But this recipe actually has 2 tablespoons of baking powder in it, so that's a lot of leavening agent in this scone, and so it works best when you actually cut the butter quite fine into the flour. So I use my food processor. So I've put in my food processor bowl 3 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/3 of a cup of granulated sugar, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I've already pulsed that so that it mixed the dry ingredients up, and so I'm ready to add my butter. Now in this scone recipe you are going to use 8 tablespoons of soft butter, or butter at room temperature. So that would be, if you had a kitchen scale, that would be 4 ounces. You don't want to use cold butter in this recipe. It's not necessary. You want to use butter that's at room temperature. So I'm going to add that to my dried ingredients, and then I'm going to pulse that about 20 times. Again, you want to but you want to cut the butter so that it's very, very fine. So there's no visible clumps in the flour mixture, in the dry ingredients. So I'm going to do that. Okay, that's 20. So I've mixed that, cut the butter in, and now I'm going to pour that mixture into a bowl. Now if you don't have a food processor, you can use a pastry cutter, but that will just take you a little bit more time. So I do like to use my food processor for this because it is quicker. So I've already prepared my wet ingredients. So my wet ingredients in this scone is 1 cup of whole milk and two large eggs. So I've whisked those up together, and now you want to take out 2 tablespoons of the egg milk mixture and set it aside so that you can brush the tops of the scones. And I've forgotten many times making this recipe and to take the 2 tablespoons out, and if you do that, then your ingredients are going to be, your dough is going to be really wet. So make sure to take the 2 tablespoons of milk egg mixture out so that you have less wet ingredients going into your dry ingredients. So next you're going to add your dried fruit if you're using it, and so then you want to mix that up into the dry ingredients. Now this scone only has 1/3 of a cup of sugar in the whole batch, so it's a nice scone to serve with jam because it's not really sweet. And so that's why I made some scones already that don't have any dried fruit in it, because I like to have some that are just plain for use for when I'm planning to use jam to serve it. Okay, so that's mixed in. Now I'm going to add my wet ingredients. And now this is going to be it's going to be a wet dough. It's going to come together and look similar to what a muffin dough would look like, or a muffin batter, but a little bit drier. So a traditional scone recipe will be quite dry. This one is like a biscuit, and it is wet, better. So that's mixed up nice. Now you're going to plop that onto your floured pastry board if you have it, or on your counter. I like to put a lot of flour down because it is quite a wet dough, and you're going to then knead it, so you're going to need to have that flour down, otherwise it's going to stick because, like I said, it's quite wet. So I'm going to just take all of that off, that spoon, and then we're going to knead it. Okay, so now I'm going to, now that I've put the dough onto the board, I'm just going to just cover it a little bit with flour, just because it's hard to knead it otherwise. And now you're going to knead it. And you're going to knead it for at least 30 times, or sorry, between 25 and 30 times. And that seems counterintuitive to a lot of people who make traditional scones, because you really don't want to knead the dough very much with a traditional scone, but this is a biscuit-like scone, and actually it rises higher with 30 kneads. Like if you only just knead it for five times, it won't rise as high. So take the time to do the kneading, because it actually does make a difference on the way your scone will turn out. Okay, so now I'm just going to, you can see it's a very soft dough, and I'm going to roll it out so that it's just an inch in height. Roughly into a circle. And that looks like it's about an inch in height. And now I'm going to cut it into biscuits. Now I'm going to use a 2.5-inch biscuit cutter, and you want to make sure that it's floured so that it doesn't stick to your dough. Now when you cut out your biscuits, you want to make sure that you cut straight down and don't twist your biscuit cutter, because that will affect the way your biscuit will rise if you twist the dough. So just flour, stamp, and pull it right up. Okay, I've cut out 8 so far, and then I've gathered up my dough again to cut out my last bit of biscuits. I'm just going to roll that out, and the more flour you work into it, it's not going to stick together nicely, so you're going to really get that one more roll out of it. So once you've rolled it to an inch in thick, then you're going to cut out your last 4 biscuits. You'll have a little bit of dough left over, and you can either toss it, or what I like to do often is just make it into one large biscuit, and then that's the baker's biscuit. Now that looks quite big, so I don't think I'll have one that big, but I will cut another one out of that, and I'll know that that one might not rise quite as nice as the others. And I'll put it at the back, and then take the last one, and then just kind of form it like that and push it down. And again, those are the baker's biscuits. So next you're going to brush the tops of the biscuits with your milk and egg. And if you forget to do this, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. You just will have a drier top to your biscuit. By brushing this on the top of your biscuit, you're going to end up with a nice glossy golden finish. And so it is worth it to do this step, but if you forget, it's not the end of the world. The biscuits will still turn out. They just might not look quite as pretty. So I'm just going to finish that up, And then we'll pop those in the oven. Now I have my oven preheated to 500 degrees. These biscuits, scones, you want to bake them, preheat your oven to 500 degrees. And once it's rocking hot and you're ready to put the biscuits in the oven, you're going to put them in the oven, and then you're going to turn the oven down to 425 degrees. Now you're going to put these scones bake not in the middle of the rack, not in the middle of your oven, but the next step up in your oven. They bake quickly and at that place in the oven, so you want to make sure it's not in the middle, like you would put where you would put your muffins. You want to put it on that next step up in your oven, and you're going to bake them at 425 for between 12 and 14 minutes. It depends on your oven. My oven doesn't run super hot, so I'll bake mine in my oven for 14 minutes, but put it in for 14 minutes, but check it after 12. And if your oven doesn't bake consistently on all sides, then rotate your baking tray halfway through the baking. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm just about to get my bean burrito ready so that I can have my dinner. I hope you have a nice day.